once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Good evening, and may the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 8 on the subject, the beast, its image. Now, I would like to begin our study reading to us on page 113. It says, "Thus the scarlet-colored beast has 7 unharmed heads. The 7 heads represent Christendom, as they do on the leopard-like beast. But it is in the symbol of the scarlet-colored beast that they are called Babylon. As he is full of names and blasphemy, it verifies the fact that he represents an exceeding sinful period. Full of names implies a period of great multiplicity of so-called Christian sects, and blasphemy because of rejecting present truth, refusing to be corrected, and yet dare to call themselves by the name of Christ Christians." So let us study closely this paragraph, brothers and sisters, and hoping that God would help us to understand the true meaning given by inspiration. First of all, I would like to read the statement in 2SR 154, saying, "It is of great importance that these things be correctly understood, for by the knowledge of the truth only can God lead His people on to victory." So I'd like to read again. It says, "It is of great importance that these things be correctly understood, for by the knowledge of the truth only can God lead His people on to victory." Now let us carefully enumerate one by one all the high points of our reading in 2SR 113. Now, first of all, the shepherd's rod plainly told us the scarlet-colored beast has 7 unharmed heads. What is the absolute significance? Why God describe or give such symbolization to the scarlet-colored beast of having 7 unharmed heads? And the shepherd's rod says the 7 heads represent Christendom, as they do on the leopard-like beast. Thus, the Christendom of the leopard-like beast is the same Christendom on the scarlet-colored beast. And then it says, "But it is in the symbol of the scarlet-colored beast that they are called Babylon." Who are they by which they are called Babylon in the symbol of the scarlet-colored beast? And secondly, what symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast that they are called Babylon? And for sure, logically, whoever this pronoun they referred to, they are not called Babylon prior to the symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast. For it is illogical to say that they are called Babylon in the symbol of the scarlet-colored beast if in reality they are already called Babylon even before that period of time. And who are they by which such symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast as full of names of blasphemy? The entire body is full of names of blasphemy. And who are they by which, according to this reading, the reason why God places in the scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy because of rejecting present truth, refusing to be corrected, and yet dare to call themselves by the name of Christ Christians? It seems that in this reading, in 2SR 113, in order to accept present truth, you need also to accept correction, or present truth always brings correction. For example, I would like to read track number 3, page 9. It says, "Always man's greatest test, and one which has ever involved almost an instantaneous decision, has been in the unrolling of the scroll in the eclipse of a past message by a new one, present truth. On every such occasion, each one has had to decide, shall I heed the new and unpopular truth and walk in its light, joining with those who are despised by nearly every religious leader in the land? Or shall I allow myself to be deterred by the decision and counsel of the ministry in my church? Track number 3, page 9. So that is the example that in order to accept present truth, you need always also to be always ready for such correction. I remember the statement in 1TG, number 12, page 17. It says in the upper part, when and how in the stream of time is this young man corrected? The only logical and fair conclusion one can come to is that when the spirit of prophecy unroots the scroll, when God raises an interpreter of the scriptures, then it is that such a doctrinal correction can be made. I would like to read again 1TG number 12, page 17. When and how in the stream of time is this young man corrected? The only logical and fair conclusion one can come to is that when the spirit of prophecy unrolls the scroll, when God raises an interpreter of the scriptures, then it is that such a doctrinal correction can be made. 1TG number 12, page 17. I would like to read 1TG 13, page 7. 1TG number 13, page 7. It says, as inspiration unrolls the scroll, it is, of course, but to be expected that it will find us surprisingly ignorant of many things. The very reason that it unrolls. If we, therefore, fail to exchange our ideas for the Lord's, then what hope is there for us ever to become enlightened and befitted for eternity? Our ideas are to fall flat, and the Lord's prophecies are to stand high and lifted up. Our duty is to prove God's word correct rather than to hold tenaciously to our preconceptions and misconceptions until God Himself steps in and put us to shame. 1TG number 13, page 7. Now let us go to 2SR page 112. It says, since the scarlet colored is the last in the symbolical procession of beasts, he must possess all the characteristics of his ancestors. The 10 horns of the nondescript beast, the 7 heads of the leopard-like, and his unharmed heads shows that he comes on the stage of action after the deadly one was healed. His scarlet color denotes curse, as it does on the dragon, the devil, in Revelation 12 verse 3. And the words go into perdition, Revelation 17 verse 11, reveal that he is to bring this world to an end by a curse that will result in entire ruin, utter destruction, future misery, or eternal death. 2SR page 112. Now, I would like to read first 2TG 36 on page 6. Let's read the statement. The beast, as though all other symbolical beasts we have seen, represents the world. Now, I would like to read again. The beast, as though all other symbolical beasts we have seen, represents the world. Now, what world does the scarlet-colored beast are thus represents? Because the shepherd says that the beast, as all other beasts, represents the world. And the question is that, what world represented by the scarlet-colored beast? Now let's go back to 2SR page 112. It says, therefore, if this beast represents our world at the present time, would it not be unwise on the part of God if He should have neglected to foresee the present day multiplicity of sects and the great confusion among Christendom, if the symbols by this beast fail to reveal the true condition of the churches? As the nondescript beast tells the fall of the church in the period he represents, so must the scarlet-colored. In fact, this is the principal reason why these prophetic beasts are presented. So that is very plain, brothers and sisters. To repeat again, the shepherd's rod made it so plain that there are only two principal reasons why our Almighty God revealed this prophetic beast to John the Beloved in the island of Patmos. The first reason is to reveal the true condition of the churches. And the second is to tell the fall of the church. And you notice, brothers and sisters, the shepherd's rod began with the nondescript beast in Daniel chapter 7. Now, let us go back first to the divine principle in 2SR page 88. 2SR page 88, it says, where systems and governments do not all exist at the same time, the symbols show their consecutive order. Another factor to be noted that every symbol of the entire procession of the beast point out facts that were to transpire within the period represented by each beast, and not one of them refers to anything in the past save the hereditary ancestral characteristics. Therefore, heads or horns have no reference to anything before or after the period represented by the beast. It is also unnatural for heads, members of the beast, to exist before or after the beast himself. Therefore, it would be inconsistent to conclude that the horns as well as the heads could denote a consecutive order of systems so long as they all appear at the time of the closing act of the beast. The leopard-like beast in his wounded state must be intended to prophetically point out the existing condition with the present civilization. 2SR page 88. Now, to repeat again, the shepherd's rod made it so plain that whatever the symbolization pertaining to each beast, it must transpire within the period represented by each beast. Now, since we are dealing first the scarlet-colored beast, then whatever the symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast, it must transpire within the period represented by the scarlet-colored beast. That is the statement. Now let us read 2SR 114. It says, the period represented by the scarlet-colored beast commenced in 1929, at which time the deadly one was healed. But his career is not fully developed until the woman shall sit upon his back. Now, the shepherd's rod already declared that the period represented by the scarlet-colored beast commenced in 1929. Now, think it thoroughly, brothers and sisters. The voice of inspiration are plainly telling us that whatever the symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast, it must transpire within the period represented by the scarlet-colored beast. Now, we already established the fact that the scarlet-colored beast commenced in 1929. So, whatever the symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast, it must transpire from 1929 onward. And it says nothing applied in the past, according to reading in 2SR page 88. Now, let us go back again to our reading, brothers and sisters. It says, let's read, 2SR 113. He has 10 horns and 7 heads, the same as the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, verse 1 to 3. The only difference between the heads of the two beasts is the deadly one on the leopard-like. As his wound was healed, it is evident that the scarlet-colored is a continuation of the leopard-like, says John, and his deadly wound was healed. So the shepherd's rod made it so plain that the scarlet-colored beast is a continuation of the leopard-like. Here in 2SR 118 and 119, I think it was enumerated one by one. The commentary in Revelation 17 verse 11. Now let us read 2SR 118 and 119. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is the 7th, and goeth into perdition. To unmask the apparent mystery, all that is necessary is to count the prophetic beast representing periods and nations. Beginning with the first beast, and as we close with the last, he must be the 8th and yet of the 7th. The lion Babylon is the first, that is Babylon. The bear Medo-Persia, the second. The four-headed leopard, Grecia, is the third. The nondescript, Rome, is the fourth. The leopard-like, from the fall of Rome to 1929. So it says from 1798 to 1929 is the fifth. The one with the lamb-like horn, United States, is the sixth. The scarlet-colored, from 1929 to the end of this present world, is the seventh. The same scarlet-colored that shall ascend from the bottomless pit and go into perdition from the resurrection of the wicked to their second death is the eighth. Now remember, brothers and sisters, in this study, in the procession of the beast, only the scarlet-colored had been described that will ascend in the bottomless pit. Now let us read the Bible. Revelation 17, verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. Who are they that behold the beast, by which it says they shall wander, or meaning it seems that they admire so much the scarlet-colored beast after the scarlet-colored beast ascended from the bottomless pit. And to repeat again, brothers and sisters, only the scarlet-colored beast in the procession of the beast, by which the Bible declared that ascended in the bottomless pit. Now, I would like to read Revelation 11, verse 7. It says, and when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. Revelation chapter 11, verse 7 and verse 8. Thus the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit in Revelation 11 verse 7 is also the beast that ascended in the bottomless pit in Revelation 17 verse 8. Now, let us study closely, brothers and sisters. If the Bible as a whole is in perfect harmony, then the possibility that the bottomless pit mentioned in Revelation 11 verse 7 and 8 is also the bottomless pit mentioned in Revelation 17 verse 8. How about Revelation chapter 9 verse 1? It says, and 2. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Revelation 9, verse 1 and 2. Thus the bottomless pit mentioned here is also the bottomless pit in Revelation 11, verse 7 and 8, and the bottomless pit in Revelation 17, verse 8. And also the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 20. Let us read Revelation chapter 20. Verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Revelation 20, verse 1. Now let us carefully study this prophecy, brothers and sisters. I would like to go back again to the statement in 2SR. Let's read the statement. On page 113, it says, thus the scarlet-colored beast has 7 unharmed heads. The 7 heads represent Christendom, as they do on the leopard-like beast. So, the 7 heads on the leopard-like beast is represented by Christendom, and the 7 heads on the scarlet-colored beast is also represented by Christendom. Now, let us read 2TG. 2TG number 15, pages 11 and page 12. The Bible points out that but one bottomless pit was opened, the pit out of which the locusts came. Revelation 9 verse 2. And it was the heavenly star that opened the pit to let out its captives. The locusts were to hurt only those men who have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Since the locusts were capable of knowing who had and also who had not the seal of God, in their foreheads, and since they were friends to God's sealed people, the truth is obvious. The star that liberated them from the pit is Christ, and the locusts are the Christians, the people that were rescued from apostate Judaism. Moreover, the fact that the angel of Revelation 20 verse 1, Satan's great enemy, is the one who was the key of the bottomless pit, it follows that the angel of Revelation 20 verse 1 and the star of Revelation 9 verse 1 are the same. For the one to whom the key was given is the only one that could have it. Now we may ask, who is the beast of the bottomless pit? If the star that came from heaven and opened the pit is Christ, and if the locusts that came out of the pit are the Christians, then there is no way of escaping the conclusion that the beast which came out of the bottomless pit is symbolical of Christendom. Thus it is that the Lord was crucified there. Now, the shepherds had made it so plain. It says that the beast which came out of the bottomless pit is symbolical of Christendom. Now, in the symbolization of both the leopard-like and the scarlet-colored, Christendom is symbolized by the seven heads, right? We already read in 2SR page 113, saying, thus the scarlet-colored beast has seven unharmed heads. The seven heads represent Christendom. Now, let us ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. Thus the Christendom in 2TG 15, page 11 and 12, which is represented by the beast that ascended from the bottomless pit. It says the beast that ascended from the bottomless pit is symbolical of Christendom. Here in 2SR page 113, the seven heads of the scarlet-colored beast is represented by Christendom. Here's another statement that I would like to read in 2SR page 157. The woman sitting on the heads. The woman sitting on the heads. Said the angel, the seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman seated. Revelation 17 verse 9. It has been previously explained that the heads represent the present-day apostate Christendom. See pages 88 to page 96. They are called mountains, denominations, seven in number, meaning all. As the prostitute sits on all seven, the symbol with unmistakable evidence reveals that the so-called Christendom will submit itself to be governed by one head, of which the woman is a symbol. 2SR page 157. So here the shepherd's rod plainly declared that the seven heads on the scarlet-colored beast is represented by the apostate Christendom. So that is very plain. Now, I would like to focus to that statement in 2SR page 100 and 2SR page 112. Let us read again. It says, since the scarlet-colored is the last in the symbolical procession of beasts, he must possess all the characteristics of his ancestors. So, from each ancestors, according to this reading, the scarlet-colored beast must have something to possess or to inherit, because to possess is to inherit. That's why the statement in 2SR, page 88, saying, another factor to be noted that every symbol of the entire procession of the beast point out facts that were to transpire within the period represented by each beast, and not one of them refers to anything in the past save the hereditary ancestral characteristics. So the only thing that refer into the past are the hereditary ancestral characteristics. So as far as the scarlet-colored beasts are thus concerned, the only symbolization of the scarlet-colored beast by which he does not inherit from his ancestors must be the seven unharmed heads and his body, which is full of names of blasphemies. Now, let us read again the statement in 2SR 112. It says, since the scarlet-colored is the last in the symbolical procession of beasts, he must possess all the characteristics of his ancestors, the 10 horns of the nondescript beast. So concerning the 10 horns, brothers and sisters, of the scarlet-colored beast, he only inherited it from his ancestors. It says, the seven heads of the leopard-like. And then it says, and his own unharmed heads show that he comes on the stage of action after the deadly one was healed. Now, let us now focus to, I think, in this reading, three periods of the scarlet-colored beast. The periods by which he inherited the 10 horns of the nondescript beast. The periods by which he inherited the 7 heads of the leopard-like, by which 6 are uninjured and 1 of them was healed. And then his own period by which at that time he has 7 unharmed heads. Now, for example, I would like to read here in, I think, track number 12 on page 40 and page 41. So let us read the statement. As the symbolical sea and earth, along with the beast characteristics, perfectly locate the abode of its beast, likewise, the wilderness locates the scarlet-colored beast's domain. And then it says, by contrast, a wilderness is the opposite of a vineyard. And since a vineyard is figurative of the home of God's people, Isaiah chapter 5, the wilderness can only represent the home of the Gentiles. The beast being in the wilderness indicates that at the time it comes into existence, there is a vineyard. Obviously, it would be superfluous to designate the wilderness if the whole world is wilderness. Track number 12, page 40 and page 41. What would you think? What vineyard mentioned there? Now, the shepherd's rod made it so plain. The fact that the location of the scarlet-colored beast is located in the wilderness indicates that at the time when the scarlet-colored beast came into existence, it says indicates that at that time there is a vineyard. For it would be superfluous to designate the wilderness if the whole world is wilderness. Now, let us read to SR 114. The period represented by the scarlet-colored beast commenced in 1929, at which time the deadly one was healed. To SR 114. Now, the scarlet-colored beast commenced in 1929. Now, the shepherd's rod says in track number 12, page 40 and page 41, that at the time when the scarlet-colored beast began to exist, indicates that there must be a vineyard, for it is superfluous to designate that the scarlet-colored beast is in the wilderness if in reality the whole world is wilderness. Then how could you be able to locate the location of the scarlet-colored beast if the whole world is wilderness? But the fact is, no, it cannot be the whole world is wilderness, because the first 4 beasts in Daniel 7, the location is in the turbulent sea. And the lamb-like horn, the location is on the symbolical earth. So there are 3 locations by which each beast originated. First 4 beasts in Daniel 7 is in the turbulent sea. The beast in Revelation 13, it is originated from the sea, but there is no description of being turbulent. And then the lamb-like horn originated on the earth, and the scarlet-colored beast originate in the wilderness. And the shepherd's rod says that at the time when the scarlet-colored beast began to exist, there must be a vineyard, for it is superfluous to designate that the scarlet-colored beast is in the wilderness if the whole world is wilderness. And since the scarlet-colored beast began to exist in 1929, then we need to ascertain clearly what vineyard represented in 1929. Now let us read to SR page 228. I would like to read again this statement. Had it not been for the earnest and zealous efforts of these godly reformers, the woman, the church, would have been in the wilderness until this day. And there would have been no Protestantism. Thus, their unselfish service broke the power of despotism, and by the imprisonment of the Pope, terminated the long prophetic period. Therefore, God, through the service of this man, it says, was to bring the woman, church, from the wilderness and prepare the way for the third call and at the 6th hour. The calls at the 6th and 9th and 11th hours must be similar to that of the preceding ones, made by a special message preached for the first time, which would have made it necessary on each occasion for another company, laborers. The nature of these messages also must have been worldwide, for they were sent into his vineyard, world. The third call, therefore represented by the 6th hour, must have come sometime after 1798, at which time the woman was due to return. Just such a message was presented to the world after AD 1798 and prior to AD 1844 in the preaching by William Miller of the 2,300 days of Daniel 8:14. Therefore, the message by Miller was represented by the company hired at the 6th hour. Now, ponder deeply this reading, brothers and sisters, in 2SR 228. The statement, had it not been for the earnest and zealous efforts of these godly reformers, pointing to the four great denominations, Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodists, and Baptists, it says, had not it been for the earnest and zealous efforts of these godly reformers, the church would have been in the wilderness until this day. That statement plainly indicating that in 1929, the woman was no longer in the wilderness. So that is very plain, brothers and sisters. To repeat again, the shepherd's rod says, had it not been for the earnest and zealous efforts of these godly reformers, Luther, Knox, Wesley, Campbell, with all others, brothers and sisters, it says the woman would remain in the wilderness and could never return to the vineyard. Now here's another statement that I would like to read. 2SR page 266 and 267. It says, let's read. A close study of the type is the only possible way to clear the truth, not only of the foregoing question, but also of the following ones. If the woman was to return from the wilderness to the vineyard, meaning civilization. So the vineyard mentioned here is civilization. If the woman was to return from the wilderness to the vineyard, civilization, after the end of the prophetic period of 1,260 years, what transpired in 1798 to prove that she came back in that year? As the imprisonment and death of the Pope answers one side of the question and clears the end of the prophetic period, where is the sign to show that the woman returned from the wilderness? So that is the question, brothers and sisters. In this study, what is the sign that the woman is to return from the wilderness to the vineyard? I would like to read first track number 15 on page 85 and page 86. It says here, unquestionably, therefore, the wilderness where the woman was nourished for the time being is the land of the Gentiles, and the woman's having to flee from the face of the serpent in her homeland shows that the dragon had made the Holy Land his headquarters. Not satisfied with this, though he even followed her into the wilderness. So that is the statement, brothers and sisters. Now let us go back first to the woman in the vineyard. Although it is little deep, very deep study, I would like to explain that this is just an illustration. God is illustrating the woman and the red dragon together with all his instruments to destroy the woman, brothers and sisters. And in the illustration in Revelation chapter 12, it was illustrated that at the very first place, Satan, his only aim at the very first place is to destroy the promised child, the Messiah. Or in other words, in that symbolization, he has no intention at first to destroy the woman because his intention is the child. In Revelation chapter 12, in verse 4, it says, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Revelation 12 verse 4. This description is plainly telling us, brothers and sisters, that the very first goal of Satan is to destroy the child, which is the Messiah, which is Jesus Christ. And that's what he did, right? That is why in the great controversy, it says here in 438, the line of prophecy in which these symbols are found begins with Revelation chapter 12, with the dragon that sought to destroy Christ at his birth. The dragon is said to be Satan. Revelation 12 verse 9. He it was that moved upon Herod to put the Savior to death. But the chief agent of Satan in making war upon Christ and his people during the first centuries of the Christian era was the Roman Empire, in which paganism was the prevailing religion. Thus, while the dragon primarily represents Satan, it is in a secondary sense a symbol of pagan Rome. But that is pointing to the first stage. Brothers and sisters, of course, during the Dark Ages, the dragon is symbolized by the papacy. In the great controversy on page 50, it says, I would like to read, this compromise between paganism and Christianity resulted in the development of the man of sin, foretold in prophecy as opposing and exalting himself above God. That gigantic system of false religion is a masterpiece of Satan's power, a monument of his efforts to seat himself upon the throne to rule the earth according to his will. Satan once endeavored to form a compromise with Christ. He came to the Son of God in the wilderness of temptation, and showing him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, offered to give all into his hands if he would but acknowledge the supremacy of the prince of darkness. Christ rebuked the presumptuous tempter and forced him to depart. But Satan meets with greater success in presenting the same temptations to men. To secure worldly gains and honors, the church was led to seek the favor and support of the great men of earth. And having thus rejected Christ, she was induced to yield allegiance to the representative of Satan, the Bishop of Rome. We know the Bishop of Rome mentioned here is the Pope. Brothers and sisters, it says, it is one of the leading doctrines of Romanism that the Pope is the visible head of the Universal Church of Christ, invested with supreme authority over bishops and pastors in all parts of the world. More than this, the Pope has been given the very titles of deity. He has been styled the Lord God the Pope, or Lord God the Pope. And see appendix. It says, Nostrum Dudum Papam. And has been declared infallible. He demands the homage of all men. The same claim urged by Satan in the wilderness of temptation is still urged by him through the Church of Rome, and vast numbers are ready to yield him homage. The great controversy on page 50. And to repeat again, brethren, according to the shepherd's rod, that the religio-political system can only be represented if the crowns appear on the heads. Now let us read 2SR 113. It says, note that the dragon of Revelation 12 verse 3 has the crown on his heads, not on his horns. It has been previously explained that when the crowns appear on the heads, it denotes a religio-political system. So the only symbolization given by God in the Bible to portray a religio-political system is if the crowns appear on the heads. But that symbolization cannot be found any of the beasts in the procession of the beast except on the red dragon. So the red dragon, brothers and sisters, is always there. The religio-political system on the period of pagan Rome, it is illustrated in the symbolization of the red dragon. The religio-political system during the Dark Ages, it was portrayed in the symbolization of the red dragon. And the religio-political system in the United States of America, it is portrayed on the symbolization of the red dragon. And brothers and sisters, we already read that on the first advent of Jesus Christ, the homeland, the vineyard, Palestine, became the dragon's headquarters. Now, let us focus first to the red dragon. Here in 2SR, on page 69, let's read the statement. Beginning from page 68. It says, "It is also impossible that both horns and heads could represent civil governments or kings. If the horns stand for political systems, then the heads cannot. If the wounded head on the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13 verse 1 to 3 represents a religious organization, then all the heads must stand for a religious systems. However, there is an exemption with the four-headed leopard of Daniel 7 verse 6. For he is without horns, and his heads are proven to be civil by the four horns of the goat. It is an unmistakable fact that the symbols are intended to reveal the civil and religious phases during the period represented by the nondescript beast in both his stages, imperial and papal Rome." So the red dragon, it says, is run parallel both the first stage of the nondescript beast and the second stage of the nondescript beast, pagan Rome and papal Rome. And then it says, "As crowns denote civil authority, and as they appear on the heads instead of on the horns, it is evident that the church in that period was using civil dictatorial power to propagate her dogmas. Thus, the lessons embodied in these symbols are far greater than we can comprehend in a moment. As the facts brought forth regarding the nature of the symbols cannot be questioned, we have a positive foundation for their applications. The dragon with his 7 heads and 10 horns with the crowns on the heads appeared at the birth of Christ as previously explained and occupies the period parallel with the nondescript beast, both first stage and second stage. The heads are represented by the biblical number 7, meaning completeness, and embrace every religious system in the days of Christ. As the dragon represents the devil who controls the heads, the symbol unmistakably denotes a complete apostasy. It is not intended to reveal that the pagan system of worship was headed by the devil, for it has never been otherwise. It was the Jewish church that had apostatized, and that is what made the biblical number 7 heads. Now, ponder deeply, brothers and sisters, this very important prophecy. First of all, why is it that concerning the red dragon, it was applied, the entire symbolization of the red dragon on the first stage of the nondescript beast, pagan Rome, rather than on the second stage? Why, brothers and sisters? First, it's so because number 7 indicates completeness, and the 7 heads pointing to all religious systems in the days of Jesus Christ, or on the first advent of Jesus Christ. But the focal point here is the woman, because the main subject in Revelation chapter 12, according to 2SR, let us read 2SR page 76. John's vision in the 12th chapter of Revelation deals with two main subjects, namely the woman clothed with the sun and the red dragon. So as far as Revelation chapter 12 is thus concerned, there are only two main subjects, the woman and the red dragon. Now, why is it that the symbolization of the red dragon is more definitely applied on the first stage of the nondescript beast, pagan Rome, rather than on the second stage? Because both B.T. Hotep and Sister White applied it. Sister White says that while it is primarily applied to Satan, the red dragon, in its secondary sense, it is applied to pagan Rome. Great controversy, page 438. Why? To repeat again, the focal point here is the woman. And number 7 indicates completeness. What is represented by the woman? I would like to read first. In 1 TG number 39, let us read the statement given by the Shepherd's Rod. 1 TG 39, page 8. Since the church as a whole is represented by both mother and children, we should know what part of the church is represented by the mother and what part by the children. According to verse 17, the chapter concludes that the servants of the Lord, those who bring forth converts, constitute the mother, and their converts, the laity, constitute the children. 1 TG 39, page 8. Or in other words, the woman represents the ministry. right? As also represented by the term the wife. Here in 2TG number 6 on page 27, it says, next we see that the church as a whole, as a family, is composed of a father, a mother, and a sons and a daughter, that the father is God, that the wife is the ministry, those who bring in converts. 2TG number 6, page 27. Now let us go back first to our subject. In 2SR 267. So let us read this statement. It says, the temples and the woman represents the church as a body, or in other words, the symbol of the woman is a revelation of the temples, revelation of the types, which is represented by the temples. And the temples are symbolical prophecies of the woman, the church. It will be noticed that the separate members of that church are represented by the composite substance of the temples. As lively stones are built up a spiritual house and a holy priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. So we, being many, in whom all the buildings fitly framed together groweth unto a holy temple of the Lord. Ephesians 2 verse 21. Therefore, these two temples represent both the church and Christ. Christ, our high priest, is prefigured by the chief cornerstone and his priestly administration by the ceremonial or sanctuary service of these two literal temples. Now here the shepherd's rod is plainly telling, brothers and sisters, that the woman is a revelation of the types, which is represented by the temples. And the temples are symbolical prophecies of the woman, which is the church. Now, I would like to elaborate first. Just a short elaboration, brothers and sisters. If you still remember that the first literal temple is the temple which is built by Solomon in Mount Moriah. And that literal temple that was built in Mount Moriah, it was destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar in 588 BC. And at that time, the true people of God, together with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Ezekiel, and with all others, they were in captivity in Babylonian captivity. They were captive in Babylon. So in that period of time, from 588 BC up to 518 BC, when they began to erect the temple, there was no temple. And God's people at that time are illustrated as scattered stones. But when it comes to a woman, it was illustrated that the woman is still in her infancy. Because in Leviticus, a girl can be called a woman at the time when her monthly period already came. So we term that period of time that in a term of a woman, it is still a little baby girl. But when it is a term as a temple, represented by scattered stones. Now, I'm trying to emphasize that portion, brothers and sisters, to let us know that in the period of pagan Rome, remember, it was predicted beforehand in the book of Daniel, according to 2SR 126 and 127. In Daniel 8, verse 20 to verse 23, it is entitled, The Exceeding Great Horn of Daniel chapter 8, verse 9. And you can read this entire chapter in, I think, contain, let me see how many pages, from 126 up to 147 page. So there are 21 pages in this chapter. The exceeding great horn of Daniel chapter 8 verse 9. Now, let us read the statement here, quoting Daniel 8 verse 20 to verse 23. 2SR 126 and 127. And in the latter time of their kingdom, the four Grecian divisions, a king of first countenance, shall stand up. This scripture is applicable to the Roman monarchy, for this king must stand at the end of the reign of the kings of Grecia. The Ptolemy was the last of the four Grecian divisions to fall under the ascendancy of Rome. With the defeat of Antony and the death of Cleopatra about 27 BC, the noted dynasty of the Ptolemies came to its end, and Egypt became a province of the Roman state. He was to stand up when the transgressors are come to the full. The Grecians have never been anything but transgressors. Therefore, the reference can be applied only to the Jewish nation, at which time the once favored people of God would have exceeded any previous record of both moral and spiritual corruption. The Jewish nation reached that condition at the time of the ascendancy of Rome. And was that the ascendancy of Rome? That was in 63 BC. And the first advent of Christ. Therefore, this king of first countenance is the Roman monarchy after the transgressors had come to their full. Now, this reading is plainly telling us, brothers and sisters, that the transgressors, which pointing to the Jewish nation, brothers and sisters, they came to the full apostasy. And in the red dragon, it was illustrated that the seven heads of the red dragon is pointing to all religious system of the Jewish nation. Brothers and sisters, so all the religious systems in the Jewish nation have been completely conquered by the devil. And that is represented by the woman. And that is why it can be more definitively applied in the period of pagan Rome, because the entire leadership, without any exemption, the woman is conquered by the dragon. If you will only to illustrate in a literal aspects, it is hard to imagine how does the devil been able to control the mind of the woman, by which that mother, that woman, she herself is the very one who killed her own child. Can you imagine, brothers and sisters? It is hard to imagine. It is seldom to find in literal aspects that there is a woman by which her only child, and it was illustrated that with a long period of time, she waited to obtain a child. But what happened when the child was born? The mother herself, she is the one who killed her own child. And that is illustrated how the dragon captivated the entire Jewish nation, brothers and sisters. If we will read tract number 12 on page 43, it says, to begin with, we see from this scripture that the woman left her vineyard, homeland, Palestine, and went into the Gentile world after her child was born. That is in her Christian period, when the dragon persecuted her through the instrumentality of the Jews. Tract number 12, page 43. Now, ponder deeply, brothers and sisters, because it seems it is a little complicated, but if we will only concentrate on the subject, there is no reason that we could not comprehend the truth intended by God, because it is God's desire that we will understand the whole truth. Now, I would like to read 2SR, page 67. Let us read. Satan still had access to heaven in Job's time. Therefore, he must have been cast out at a later date, says John. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman, which brought forth the man-child. Revelation 12:13. Now, ponder deeply if this predicted event, Revelation 12:13, had been perfectly fulfilled on the first advent of Jesus Christ. First of all, if you will look at the statement in 2SR page 76, it says, the symbol of the woman in the New Testament time covers three divisions. First, the apostolic period. Second, her absence from civilization in the wilderness for 1,260 days, years of papal persecution, verses 6 and 14. So there are only two verses that quoted here to represent the woman in the dark ages. Revelation chapter 12, verse 6 and 14. Third, the last period of the church while in conflict with the dragon. And the verses is Revelation 12, verse 15, 16, and 17. Then, let us study closely, brothers and sisters, because sometimes Revelation 12, verse 15, it was applied also by B.T. Hotep during the dark ages. So, that's what it means in the statement in tract number 5, page 31, that it was applied incidentally into the past in order to build the necessary foundation to build the future, brothers and sisters. Now, let us go back here in the statement. 2SR page 67. Satan still had access to heaven in Job's time. Therefore, he must have been cast out at a later date, says John. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Revelation 12 verse 13. Who is she, the woman that had been persecuted by the dragon? The woman that brought forth the man-child, according to the Bible, Revelation 12 verse 13. And then it says, the next necessary step is to find when the dragon persecuted the woman, the Christian church. So the Christian church is called woman. Now, there are two women mentioned here, the Jewish church and the Christian church. Who brought forth the man-child on the first advent of Jesus Christ? The Jewish church or the Christian church? Now let us read 2SR, page 72. It says, thus it was the Jewish church that brought forth the Son of God and not the Christian. So I would like to read again. Thus it was the Jewish church that brought forth the Son of God and not the Christian. Who brought forth the Son of God or the man-child? It is the Jewish church and not the Christian. Now here's another statement that I would like to read in track 15. Track 15, pages 68 and page 69. It is clear to see that this woman was clothed with the sun and attacked by the dragon even before her child, Christ, was born. Yes, years before the Christian church and the gospel came into being. To say that she represents the New Testament church clothed with the gospel of Christ is indeed as ungrounded and as illogical a theory as to say that the chicken is hatched before the egg is laid. So that is the statement in track number 15, pages 68 and page 69. Now, here's another statement that I would like to read in 2TG number 16, page 16 and page 17. Now the questions naturally arise. If Christ is the one who brought forth the Christian church, then how can she be his mother? And was not Christ born at least 30 years before the Christian church came into being? And not the egg laid before the chicken is hatched? And finally, is it not true that if we blunder forth on an erroneous premise, that we shall find ourselves farther and farther from the truth of the subject? Most assuredly. Let us then make certain of the foundation upon which we build. So here the statement 2TG number 16, page 16 and 17, plainly telling us that on the first advent of Jesus Christ, the one who brought forth the Son of the living God is the Jewish church and not the Christian church. Why? Because Jesus Christ was born in 4 BC. And the Christian church was in existence in 31 AD. And as a matter of fact, it is Jesus Christ who established the Christian church. But when does the persecution began? Let's go back again to 2SR page 67. It says, the next necessary step is to find when the dragon first persecuted the woman. And then it says, the Christian church. We shall then have the truth of the time Satan was cast out. That time of persecution is recorded in the Acts 8 verse 1. And Saul was consenting unto his death, the death of Stephen. And at that time, there was a great persecution against the church which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria except the apostles. Thus, the great persecutions against the church was about 34 AD. It is true that Satan persecuted Christ before that time, but Christ is not the woman. He is the child whom Satan wished to devour. Therefore, Satan was cast out immediately after Christ ascended on high. The spur prophecy, speaking of the occasion, says. The only point that I would like to elaborate in this reading in 2SR page 67, the great persecution against the woman is in 34 AD, the stoning of Stephen. So from 34 AD backwards, no, the dragon did not persecute the woman, but rather he waited the child to be born. Because his aim, his goal at first is not the woman, the child. But after the child was born, he defeated several times. And even at the time when he crucified Jesus Christ, the devil thought that Jesus Christ will no longer, brothers and sisters, to live again. But he was mistaken. Jesus Christ was resurrected. And Jesus Christ gave the message to the devil by saying here in John chapter 10, it is a message to the devil because he never thought that Jesus Christ could resurrect his own self. Here in John chapter 10, verse 17 and 18, it says, "Therefore that my Father loved me, because I laid down my life, that I might take it again. No man take it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father." John 10, verse 17 and 18. That is the ultimate power of God, that He could resurrect His own self. And that is a mystery, brothers and sisters, by which Satan did not know. Now, what I'm trying to emphasize is that the woman represented by the Christians, it did not become a woman not until in 27 AD. Or let us put in this way, the woman, brothers and sisters, prior to 27 AD is just a baby little girl, still in her infancy. But her mother was already defeated by the devil, brothers and sisters, by which that woman, brothers and sisters, it seems that illustrated that she delivered at least two children, male and female. Of course, the male is Jesus Christ, and the female, brothers and sisters, is pointing to the early Christian church, the apostles, the apostolic church. So in that period of time, in the period of the pagan Rome, it is perfectly illustrated by the symbolization of the red dragon, that the red dragon has 7 heads, and the 7 heads have been crowned. To crown the 7 heads, to indicate that the 7 heads is already owned by Satan, completely conquered by Satan. And the shepherd says, all religious systems prior to the birth of Christ was already under control by Satan. That can you imagine, brothers and sisters, that the woman, which is the Jewish church, she of herself had been controlled by Satan, by which she did not even have mercy to her own child, which is the Messiah. She is the one who killed her own child, the Messiah. Unlike with the woman, which is the apostles, brothers and sisters, by which, brothers and sisters, it was illustrated that in 100 AD, when all the apostles died, in that period of time, it is illustrated that her seed, represented by Ephesus, is just a little baby girl that she needed to be nourished because she is still a sucking child. And that is why it is the absolute prerogative of the husband to rescue the little baby girl in the hands of the dragon, because the homeland became the dragon's headquarters. Now, I would like to read tract number 12. It says here on page 43. I would like to read this reading. "So had he not nourished her, keep her in existence by a miracle, the church would have perished during those dark ages of religion." So that is the statement. If Jesus Christ had not nourished her, keep her in existence by a miracle, that church would have perished during those dark ages of religion. But what happened to the woman in 538 AD? She died. The statement ended in 538 AD. The woman died and then gave birth to her seed, brothers and sisters. Now, I would like to read here in 2SR page 266. The question before us is, when will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? In the preceding paragraphs, it was explained that the first section of the Christian church ended in 538 AD. When it comes to the temple, the illustration, the temple destroyed. In 2SR page 271, it says, as type destroyed type, so antitype must have destroyed antitype. That is, ancient Babylon, the type of the papacy, robbed and destroyed Solomon's temple, the type of the early Christian church, and led Israel into captivity. This symbolical prophecy finds meet its perfect fulfillment in 538 AD, when the papacy went forth and destroyed the church, Christian, robbed them of the truth, and led the followers of Christ into captivity, subject to papal rule. 2SR 271. But when it came to the woman, it was illustrated that the woman died, giving birth to her seed. And it is illustrated by Rachel, right? I would like to read that reading in 1TG 48 on page 24 and 25. It says, this concerning Jeremiah 31, verse 15 and 16. To understand these verses, so I would like to read first, verse 15 and 16. Thus saith the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were not. Thus saith the Lord, refrain thy voice from weeping, and thine eyes from tears. For thy work shall be rewarded, saith the Lord, and they shall come again from the land of the enemy. To understand these verses, we must first look into the historical background of them. Rachel, the wife of Jacob, had but two sons of her own, Joseph and Benjamin. They were the only sons that were born to Jacob in the promised land. Rachel died while giving birth to Benjamin, and so she herself could not have wept for the loss of her children. They were both with her when she died. Hence, the only conclusion one can come to is that Rachel in the scripture is figurative. After the death of Solomon, the kingdom was divided, the 10 tribes taking the north and the 2 tribes taking the south. The tribe of Joseph was in the one kingdom and the tribe of Benjamin in the other. Rachel, therefore, must be the figurative mother of the children of both kingdoms, Judah and Israel. So here, brothers and sisters, Joseph represented by the 10 tribes and Benjamin is represented by the 2 tribes. Now, hoping I could explain this subject on the subject, the daily and the sanctuary, and also concerning the woman. But what I'm trying to explain is concerning the beast, because the illustration given by the shepherd's rod, brothers and sisters, in track number 15, let us read again. On page 85, I would like to read again. Unquestionably, therefore, the wilderness where the woman was nourished for the time being is the land of the Gentiles, and the woman's having to flee from the face of the serpent in her homeland shows that the dragon had made the Holy Land his headquarters. Not satisfied with this, though he even followed her into the wilderness. Track number 15, page 85 and page 86. Or in other words, it was illustrated in the Bible that before the child was born, the intention of the devil is the child, that if possible, he could destroy the child. But after the child was born, and we already explained that it seems very successful, because what he did, he conquered the mother of the child. That through his ultimate power, Satan had been able to control the entire religious system represented by the woman, which is the Jewish church, that they of themselves became the instrument of Satan to kill her own child. And that's what happened, right? But he was mistaken, because Satan did not even know that Jesus Christ has an ultimate power to resurrect his own self. And he did not even know that Satan is only fulfilling the mission of Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ came to this earth to sacrifice his life to redeem the human being, to redeem from their condition, brothers and sisters, having been fallen into sin. But after Jesus Christ ascended to heaven, his aim is no longer the child, but rather to destroy the woman. And that is why he persecuted the apostolic church, the first representation of the woman according to the shepherd's rod. But since it is unbroken line, brothers and sisters, God did not allow that all the apostles will die without first giving birth an offspring as the seed of the apostles, as the seed of that woman. But Jesus Christ hides that woman because in reality, she was still in infancy, need to be nourished. But why is it in 538 AD, the statement in the Bible is from prophecy, the woman is being nourished again? Can be only easily discerned by the temple's type that woman in 538 AD died after giving birth to her seed. And that seed of the woman miraculously been nourished by Jesus Christ. So the red dragon on the second stage of the exceeding great horn cannot be exactly fits the illustration that he has 7 heads, being crowned, because that illustration is only pointing if the woman that he desired to destroy, he had been able to defeat it. How could the dragon been able to defeat the woman during the dark ages of religion? Because at that time, the dragon failed to see the location where thus the woman had been hidden by Jesus Christ. So it cannot be illustrated, brothers and sisters, that exactly and completely on the second stage of the exceeding great horn. But it is exactly illustrated on the first stage of the nondescript beast having 10 horns, which is pagan Rome. Because at that time, the red dragon having 7 heads, being crowned, brothers and sisters. Now, how about in the Protestant period? Think it thoroughly. Would you think Revelation chapter 12 is directly applied on the first advent of Jesus Christ rather than in the judgment that pertains to the living? In the days of the apostles, the book of Revelation were not yet written. And the shepherd's rod plainly told us here in tract number 5 on page 32. Let us read again. It says, the statements which must shortly come to pass, Revelation 1 verse 1, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter, Revelation 4 verse 1, go to say that the revelation is given with the one particular object in view of showing the things lying not behind but ahead of John's time, with reference being made only incidentally to the past in order to lay the necessary foundation upon which to build the future. So here the shepherd's rod says that no, the entire book of Revelation, the particular object in view, lying not behind but ahead of John's time, meaning it must be from 100 AD onwards. It could not be 100 AD backwards. So the application of the red dragon on its primary phase, brothers and sisters, during pagan Rome, could not be the perfect fulfillment of Revelation chapter 12. Why? Because the Bible very plain that the woman that had been persecuted by the dragon is the woman that brought forth the man-child. Revelation 12 verse 13. Yes, in 34 AD, that is the first persecution against the woman. But the fact is, the woman that had been persecuted by the dragon, according to TSR page 67, it is the apostolic church. And the apostolic church is not the one who brought forth the man-child at the first advent of Jesus Christ. And we will connect our subject to the Assyrian Confederacy. Now, let us read again, tract number 14. Tract number 14, let us read. It says, page 32. The high points of this confederacy, some of which are still unfulfilled, fall into sequence thusly. Number 1, the overthrow of both ancient Israel and Syria by ancient Assyria as a divine judgment, especially upon Israel, for confederating against her own brethren, the kingdom of Judah. Isaiah 7, verse 2 to 9. Second, the birth of a man-child, Emmanuel, to a virgin for a sign to the house of David. Isaiah 7 verse 13 and 14. Now think it thoroughly. In Isaiah 7 verse 13 and 14. Now let us read, because the shepherd's rod says that predicted event, the birth of the man-child, it is still unfulfilled. Isaiah 7 verse 13 and 14. Because if you will apply it on the first advent of Jesus Christ, there is a time discrepancy. Now let us read first the Bible. Isaiah 7 verse 13 and verse 14. And he said, hear ye now, O house of David, for you to weary men, but will you weary my God also? So the main subject here is the house of David. And that's why in tract number 14, let us go back again to the reading. Tract number 14, page 32, it says, the birth of a man-child, Emmanuel, to a virgin for a sign to the house of David. So the birth of this man-child, represented by Emmanuel, to a virgin, it is assigned to the house of David. Isaiah 7 verse 13 and 14. I would like to read this reading in the Old Symbolic Code. 3 Symbolic Code number 2, page 3. And now, in the time of the ingathering of modern Israel, the 144 4,000 who are to make up the antitypical house of David, and who are to constitute the first fruits of the kingdom, for which Christ taught his disciples to pray. 3 symbolic code number 2, page 3. So the statement assigned to the house of David, assigned to the 144,000 living saints. Now let us read again the Bible. Isaiah 7 verse 13 and 14. And he said, Hear ye now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men? But will ye weary my God also? It is a figurative speech, brothers and sisters. To weary God is to give many reasons, alibi, brothers and sisters, when God is speaking to us and giving us an assurance, and still we make an alibi, brothers and sisters. And that is the only thing that we weary our God. And it says here in verse 14, Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Verse 14 is still unfulfilled. If you will apply it to the first advent of Jesus Christ, the fulfillment of this one could not be symbolical. Because if it is symbolical, the Jewish church is not virgin. Before Jesus Christ was born in 4 BC, in 63 BC, the Jewish church became harlot. Now let us read the great controversy. Let's read the statement here. The great controversy, 383. It was by departure from the Lord and alliance with the heathen that the Jewish church became a harlot, and Rome, corrupting herself in like manner by seeking the support of worldly powers, receives a like condemnation. The great controversy 383, and that was fulfilled in 63 BC. And that is the reason that the Roman monarchy was established on the throne in 27 BC according to 2 SR 126 and 127. And for sure, verse 14 can be applied only to the first advent of Jesus Christ, to his biological mother, Mary. Because when Mary conceived the child, she was still in her virginity. This prophecy is not literal. It is symbolical prophecy. And the shepherd's rod plainly told us in tract number 14. Let us read tract number 14, page 33. So let us read a statement. Beginning from page 32. In amplification of this cluster of events, several facts stand out in unmistakable self-interpretation. Emmanuel, by virtue of his virgin birth, and his name, God with us, Matthew 1 verse 23, can only be Christ with us. Number 2, he was born for a sign that the unholy alliance between Israel and Syria was to come to naught. Third, the lands Israel and Syria, which Judah abhorred, were to be forsaken of both their kings, conquered by the king of Assyria, before Emmanuel was to be able to refuse evil and choose the good, and before Maher-shalal-Hasbaz was to be able to say, my father and my mother. But the simple historical fact that these two kingdoms were overthrown centuries before Emmanuel was even born brings a time discrepancy which can be reconciled only by the conclusion that all 4 nations, Judah, Israel, Syria, and Assyria, involved in this historical action were typical of 4 others that were to arise sometime following Emmanuel's birth. For after his birth, Israel and Syria were to be conquered by Assyria. Tract number 14, page 32 and 33. Although we have a separate study entitled Assyrian Confederacy. But the only reason that we quoted those passages to prove, brothers and sisters, that there is still a prediction of the birth of the man-child. And to repeat again, brothers and sisters, as far as the Bible is thus concerned, Revelation chapter 12, verse 13, cannot exactly fits the occurrence on the first advent of Jesus Christ. And the only reason is that it's so because the Bible is very plain that the woman by which the dragon will persecute is the woman that brought forth the man-child. If it is the first advent of Jesus Christ, the woman that brought forth Jesus Christ is the Jewish church. But the red dragon never persecuted the Jewish church. Contrariwise, the Jews became instruments of Satan to persecute the Christian church. Tract number 1243, and Desire of Ages 205. But the fact is, the Christian church did not brought forth the man-child. It is the Jewish church. Now here in answerer number 2, page 45, I would like to read. It says, Revelation 12, verse 13 to verse 17. And I think these verses, brothers and sisters, is more pertaining to the last generation of men. Then it says, nearly all Christians agree that the only tenable interpretation of the woman here mentioned is that she symbolizes the church, and the fact that she gave birth to the man-child, Christ, shows that she is therefore symbolical of the church in at least the Christian dispensation. This statement is opposite to the first advent of Jesus Christ, because the statement says the fact that Jesus Christ is the one who established the Christian church. Jesus Christ was born at least 30 years before the Christian era. Brothers and sisters, now let us read the statement. The idea advanced at 2SR page 72. The idea advanced that the woman is a symbol of the Christian church only, and the moon of the Jewish ceremonial system proves incorrect. The Christian church was founded about 31 AD, or not earlier than 27 AD, at which time Christ began to preach, being about 30 years of age. Therefore, the symbols point back at least 31 years before the beginning of the Christian era, for the woman was travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So the description on the first advent of Jesus Christ, it says at least 31 years before the beginning of the Christian era. But the statement in answerer number 2, page 45, let us read. It says, nearly all Christians agree that the only tenable interpretation of the woman here mentioned is that she symbolizes the church, and the fact that she gave birth to the man-child, Christ, shows that she is therefore symbolical of the church in at least the Christian dispensation. But on the first advent of Jesus Christ, the statement in 2SR page 72, at least 31 years backward before the Christian dispensation. So answerer number 2, page 45 is pointing to the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, when the woman, brothers and sisters, will brought forth the man-child. Let us distinctly separate the man-child and the male child. That phrase, man-child, simply means that at the time when that child was in existence, he is already matured. He is already in the full maturity. And the only one in physical being that we can call him man-child, it is Adam. Because at the time when God created Adam, even on the very day, just 1 day old or 1 day young, Adam is already a full-grown man. So Adam can be called man-child, brothers and sisters. Therefore, we can easily discern that it is pointing to the second Adam, which is pointing to Jesus Christ, brothers and sisters. So let us study closely the perfect fulfillment of the birth of the man-child. Now, for example, I would like to read to you in tract number 14 so that we could separate the man-child and the male child. Here in tract number 14, on page, let us read the statement. Here in page 33, the statement says, before Emmanuel was to be able to refuse evil and choose good. So, this Emmanuel cannot be called man-child because he is not yet capable to refuse evil and choose good. Because if you will say man-child, then he is matured. Now, here in tract number 14, page 35, and as he knows only to say my father and my mother, it is Mahershal al-Hasbas. Let us distinctly separate the Mahershal al-Hasbas in page 33. Because the Mahershal al-Hasbas in page 33, it says, before Mahershal al-Hasbas was to be able to say my father and my mother. This Mahershal al-Hasbas, he could not been able even to say my father and my mother. Or in other words, that Mahershal al-Hasbas, as yet he could not be able to recognize who is his father and who is his mother. But this Mahershal al-Hasbas in tract 14, page 35, he could be able to recognize his father and his mother, because it says, and as he knows only to say my father and my mother, while Emmanuel, Christ in the person of his people, knows to refuse the evil and choose the good. This is the Emmanuel represented by the man-child, because they know how to refuse the evil and choose the good. Now, think it thoroughly, brothers and sisters, as far as the Bible is thus concerned in this study. The only way that you could be able to refuse the evil and choose the good is the butter and honey. That is very plain in Isaiah chapter 7. Let's read Isaiah 7 verse 15. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. So the only way that you could be able to refuse the evil and choose the good, you need to eat butter and honey. But according to verse 21 in Isaiah chapter 7, and it shall come to pass in that day that a man shall nourish a young cow and 2 sheep, and it shall come to pass for the abundance of milk that they shall give, he shall eat butter, for butter and honey shall everyone eat that is left in the land. Now, if the one that be left in the land, brothers and sisters, is those who eat butter and honey, or in other words, we can easily discern that these two Emmanuels in track number 14, the Emmanuel by which he could not be able to refuse the evil and choose the good, he could not be a part of the living saints. And in order to save them, God laid them down to sleep. Because the only one that will be left in the land, meaning pointing to the living saints, are those people who eat the butter and honey, by which, by eating butter and honey, they had been able to refuse the evil and choose the good. And that butter and honey is cometh from the 2 sheep and the young cow. The young cow, brothers and sisters, and the 2 sheep, both of them is pointing to the inspired records. The 2 sheep represent the Bible, Old and New Testament, and the young cow represent the spirit of prophecy. Or in Zechariah chapter 4, it is called the golden bowl. But we need to study this subject because it is very important to understand who is he, the man that nourished the young cow and the 2 sheep. Brothers and sisters, to repeat again, it is high time now to spend all our energies to study closely the prophecies which soon, very soon, it will be fulfilled in quick succession. Hoping that you will abide listening and viewing this program, brothers and sisters, because we are trying to the utmost of our ability that had been given by God to us, and hoping that God would help us, that we could be able to share this message, if possible, in a very clear explanation, brothers and sisters. Although it is really a deep study, but through the wisdom of God, heavenly wisdom, everything is possible. So thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters, and have a wonderful evening.